Janet, bring us up to speed on what's happening in the courtroom this morning.
Morning. So we've been getting some close to live updates from our reporters who are in the court, and the main focus from this morning's arguments is what Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy said. Now, he's effectively considered the swing vote on the court, and when the Obama administration's attorney Don Verrilli was up there, he said that the government has a, quote, very heavy burden of justification for the measures requirement in the law that's at issue here, which is the new rule that most Americans will have to buy health insurance or pay a penalty.
And Janet, how are the liberal justices on the court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Stephen Breyer, how are they coming back on this? Are they questioning it all? Or do they have any questions that seem leading in one direction or another?
During the morning's arguments, they really seemed to be kind of coming to the defense of the administration, and they weighed in repeatedly and had a lot of skeptical questions. So it was very clear from their side kind of where they were leaning on this.
And in terms of today's votes, there's also going to be, today's arguments, there will be arguments on tomorrow as well. What will be the substance of Wednesday's arguments?
That's right. There's going to be two pieces to tomorrow's argument. One is a secondary challenge in the law. That's whether the 2010 health care law that was backed by the Obama administration, whether that can expand Medicaid coverage to the states. What the plaintiffs in the lawsuit argue is that the Medicaid expansion unfairly burdened states because over time they would eventually have to pay for that. The second issue is that the court will consider if they do decide to strike down the individual mandate. That's the main issue in the case, the requirement that most Americans buy insurance. If they strike that down, whether they can simply just take that requirement out of the law or whether the entire law would have to be struck down together or whether there may be some kind of an in-between measure.
All right. And of course, all your reporters are following that very closely. We have a live blog on WSJ.com with updates throughout the day where people can go and tune in for these arguments being heard before the Supreme Court. And yesterday, Janet, in Monday's arguments, the Supreme Court sent a clear signal that they believed that they could rule on this health care overhaul now, even though these penalties actually hadn't kicked in yet. That was a big question yesterday.
Exactly. The issue that they were discussing yesterday was whether it may be too early for the court to decide effectively on the merits of this case. So the new requirement that most people carry insurance doesn't take effect until 2014. And there was this legal issue out there. Well, maybe the court can't be deciding this case right now if this penalty for Americans isn't even in effect. And based on the way the justices, their questions and the kind of sense we get from our reporters in the courtroom, the feeling is that the justices did not feel like there was any reason to wait on this, that from a legal standpoint, they had that it seemed likely that they were going to decide right away on the merits of the case. And by right away, we mean when we expect a decision from them by the end of June.
All right. And again, on the arguments being heard today on whether the law's requirement that people carry health insurance or pay a penalty is justified, let's just refresh us on both sides of the issue. On the challenger side, they believe this is an unprecedented intrusion on individual liberty. What says the other side?
Exactly. So the challengers say that, if the government can require you to carry health insurance or pay a fee, they can require you to get a gym membership or to eat broccoli, and that there will be no limits to what the federal power will be. What the administration is arguing through their main attorney, Don Verrilli, is they said, look, everybody is paying for health care anyway. We already know that people will eventually get sick, and it's just a mechanism for how we pay for it. What they argue is that even if you don't pay through insurance or some type of, even if you don't pay through getting coverage, right, those costs for the uninsured are eventually passed on to you in the form of uncompensated care. So hospitals charge more to cover all the people who, come there and don't have insurance. So basically the crux of the government argument is you're already paying for it, and by requiring you to get insurance, this is just a mechanism to make sure people pay before they get sick as opposed to after they get sick.